Have you ever woken up to find the house your father built with his own hands every nail? Every board soaked in his sweat and dreams suddenly locked against you? You stand there, key in hand, trying the lock that's been changed overnight. They think you'll walk away. They think you'll surrender. But they forgot one crucial detail: the deed still bears your name. This story begins at that moment, standing on the porch of my childhood home, staring at a lock that shouldn't exist, and it doesn't end until every debt is paid in full. My name is Lauren Miller, and I'm 35 years old. As I sit in my Portland apartment, surrounded by architectural blueprints and lines of code on multiple monitors, I can still smell the sawdust from my father's workshop. Richard Miller wasn't just a businessman in construction and historic home restoration. He was an artist who spoke through timber and stone. "Trust is built by hand. Honor is kept by heart," he'd say, his calloused fingers tracing the grain of reclaimed wood. Those words echo through me now. 3 months after his sudden stroke took him from us. 3 months since I last heard his laugh bouncing off the walls of our craftsman home in southeast Portland. That house, God. That house. Dad designed and built it himself in 1995, the year I turned 10. I remember holding the level while he checked the foundation, my small hands struggling with the metal tool. "Steady, Lauren. Everything good starts with a solid foundation." Every weekend, we'd work on something together: the built-in bookshelf in the living room where he taught me about joinery, the kitchen cabinets we installed while he explained load-bearing walls and structural integrity. But it was in the garage where we truly bonded. That sacred space housed his 1968 Mustang, a rust bucket we'd found at an estate sale. For 7 years, we rebuilt that car together. Every bolt, every gasket, every painstaking hour of sanding and priming, patience and precision, he'd remind me when I got frustrated with a stubborn carburetor. That's what separates craftsmanship from mere work. The house grew with our memories. The back deck where he taught me to read construction blueprints, using his actual projects as teaching tools. The basement workshop where sawdust perpetually floated in afternoon sunbeams, where he'd let me use the lathe once I proved I could respect the danger. The garden where he grew tomatoes and roses with equal dedication, his hands equally gentle with both delicate petals and rough lumber. When I left for MIT to study computer science, Dad converted the attic into a home office for my visits. Different kind of architecture, he'd joke about my career choice. But you're still building things that matter. He'd call me during his lunch breaks, sitting in his truck at job sites, describing the historical details he was preserving in some 1920s bungalow or Victorian row house. The last project we worked on together was refinishing the original hardwood floors. Last Christmas, just months before the stroke, my hands next to his, both of us on our knees, carefully sanding with the grain. This wood has stories, Lauren, every scratch, every worn spot that's life happening. We're not erasing the stories, just helping them shine. Those floors still hold our footprints, our history, our love. The house isn't just property or an asset. It's the physical manifestation of my father's philosophy that good things are built slowly, with intention, with care. It's where he taught me that inheritance isn't just about money or objects, but about values, skills, and the spaces where love lives. Now, as I stare at his death certificate next to the deed he carefully transferred to my name 5 years ago, you'll know how to honor this place. He'd said, I understand why he was so insistent. He knew this house was more than wood and nails. It was our story, built board by board, memory by memory, and he trusted me to protect it. I didn't know then that protecting it would mean protecting it from my own mother, from a stranger who would walk through our door and try to erase every trace of Richard Miller. But Dad taught me about foundations, about structural integrity, about fighting rot before it spreads. They have no idea what they've awakened in me. This house is my inheritance. Yes, but more than that, it's my father's last lesson in standing firm, in building something that lasts, in never letting anyone tear down what was built with love. The grief support group at St. Mary's seemed like a blessing at first. Mom Margaret had been hollowed out by Dad's death. wandering the house like a ghost herself. When she mentioned meeting someone who understood her pain, I felt relief. Stephen Harper had lost his wife to cancer 2 years prior. He seemed gentle during that first coffee introduction, his silver hair neat, his handshake firm but not aggressive. "Your father built an incredible home," he'd said, admiring the exposed beams in our living room. "Real craftsmanship. You don't see that anymore." 6 months. That's all it took before he was moving boxes into Dad's house. "Just temporarily," Mom assured me over the phone. "He's selling his condo, and it makes no sense for him to rent something when I have all this space." I wanted to support her. God. I wanted her to be happy again. The house had felt too quiet, too empty without Dad's presence. Maybe Stephen could help fill that silence with something other than grief. The first changes were subtle. I arrived for Sunday dinner to find Dad's workbench pushed against the garage wall. Stephen's exercise equipment taking center stage. "Just needed some room to stay in shape," he explained, not meeting my eyes. That old bench wasn't being used anyway. Then the garden, Dad's heirloom tomatoes, the ones he'd cultivated for 15 years, were gone. In their place, store-bought sod. "Maintenance was too much for your mother," Stephen explained. Though Mom had never complained before, she stood beside him, nodding slowly, her eyes unfocused. The living room came next. Stephen hired contractors, not restoration specialists, just cheap labor to modernize the space. They painted over the natural wood trim Dad had spent weeks hand-finishing. "White brightens everything up," Stephen announced, as if he'd discovered something revolutionary. I tried talking to Mom privately. Dad restored those original details. He spent months finding period-appropriate stain. "Lauren, honey," she interrupted, her voice strange and flat. "Stephen's trying to make this house a home for us, our home. You need to let the past go." But it wasn't the past I was clinging to, it was the disrespect, the casual erasure of Dad's work. Stephen had started calling it our renovation, as if he'd earned the right to tear apart what my father built. The dinner where everything shifted. Stephen had invited his friends over. I sat at the table where Dad used to carve the Thanksgiving turkey, listening to Stephen tell stories about fixing up this old place. When I mentioned it was my childhood home, he laughed. "Well, you're always welcome as a guest, Lauren." Guest. The word hung in the air like a challenge. "I'm not a guest," I said quietly. "This is my father's house." Stephen's smile didn't reach his eyes. It was your father's house. Now it's your mother's and mine." "Stephen," Mom said weakly, but he squeezed her hand, and she fell silent. After dinner, I found him in Dad's workshop, sorting through tools. "These are antiques," he was telling someone on the phone. "Should get decent money for them." "Those aren't for sale," I said from the doorway. He looked up, that same cold smile playing at his lips. "Your mother agrees we need to declutter. These tools are just collecting dust." "They're my father's tools." That word again, sharp as any saw blade. "Lauren, I understand this is difficult, but your mother and I are building a new life together. That means making changes. If you can't respect that, perhaps you should visit less often." I left that night with my hands shaking, not from sadness, but from rage. In my apartment, I pulled out the deed Dad had transferred to me, reading his handwritten note again. For Lauren, who understands that homes are built with love and kept with courage. He'd known. Somehow, Dad had known I'd need to protect this place, not from strangers or natural disasters, but from the very person who should have cherished it most. Stephen Harper thought he'd won something. He thought grief had made us weak, malleable. He looked at our family's loss and saw opportunity: a free house, valuable tools, a broken woman seeking comfort. He had no idea who he was truly dealing with. Richard Miller's daughter didn't just inherit his house. I inherited his backbone, his principles, and his absolute intolerance for those who would tear down what others built with love. The destruction accelerated after Stephen's children arrived. Maya and Colin Harper descended on Dad's house like locusts. each carrying their own brand of entitlement. Maya, 32 and pregnant, immediately claimed the guest room, my old bedroom, as a nursery. Colin, 30 and unemployed, took over the garage entirely. I discovered the bookshelf massacre on a Thursday evening, the built-in shelving Dad and I had installed together, where he'd carved small roses into the corners for Mom's birthday, gone, reduced to splinters in a dumpster outside. Stephen stood in the empty space, directing workers to install some flat-pack furniture store monstrosity. "The old shelves were a safety hazard," he said without looking at me. "Wouldn't want anyone getting hurt." "Those shelves held thousands of pounds of books for 20 years, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Dad engineered them to last centuries." "Well, they didn't fit our aesthetic," as if he'd contributed anything beyond destruction. Colin had transformed the garage into his personal CrossFit gym. Dad's workbench, the one Stephen had initially just pushed aside, was now completely gone. The pegboard where Dad's tools once hung in perfect order was ripped down. Holes pocked in the drywall like accusations. The Mustang spot, that sacred space where we'd spent countless hours, was now occupied by Colin's weight rack. "Pretty sweet setup, right?" Colin said, catching me staring. "Stephen said you never use this space anyway." "My father and I restored a car here," I managed. "Yeah, well, living in the past isn't healthy." He turned back to his pull-up bar, dismissing me in my own father's space. Maya was worse in her calculated sweetness. She'd painted the kitchen, Dad's kitchen, with its custom cabinets a garish yellow. The original hardwood floors we'd refinished together were now covered with cheap vinyl planking. "So much easier to clean with a baby coming," she explained, rubbing her belly. "Your mom agrees it's more practical." Mom. She drifted through these violations like a sleepwalker, nodding at whatever Stephen suggested. When I pulled her aside, desperate to break through, she'd just repeat his words. "We're building something new. Lauren, you need to accept that." The day I found them selling Dad's tool collection was when something inside me finally snapped. Not broke, snapped into place, like a bolt finding its thread. Stephen had set up a yard sale, of all things. Dad's Japanese saws, his grandfather's hand planes, the level I'd held as a child, all priced with little tags like they were trash. "These are heritage tools," I said, my hand closing around the level. "Some of these are over 100 years old." Stephen shrugged. "Then collectors will pay good money for them." "They're not for sale." "Everything's for sale at the right price." He reached for the level in my hand. "And your mother already agreed." "My mother isn't the only one with a say here." His face shifted then, the mask slipping. "Actually, she is. This is her house now, mine and hers. You're just a guest," I finished. "You keep saying that, but guests don't have their names on deeds." The color drained from his face. "What deed?" I smiled then, probably the first genuine smile since Dad died. "The one my father filed 5 years ago. The one that makes me the legal owner of this property." "That's impossible. Margaret would have told me." "Mom doesn't know," I said simply. "Dad didn't want to burden her with property taxes and maintenance decisions. He set up a trust that covers everything. She has lifetime residency rights, of course. But Stephen..." I picked up one of Dad's saws, testing its weight. "You have nothing. You are the guest here." The yard sale ended immediately. Stephen stormed inside, Maya and Colin trailing behind. I heard shouting, Mom's confused voice, doors slamming. Good. Let them rage. Let them realize their free ride was built on assumptions. I spent that evening documenting everything, every change, every destruction, every piece of Dad's legacy that had been violated. Photos, receipts when I could find them, estimates of damage. The file grew thick with evidence. They thought grief made us weak. They thought a widow's loneliness was an invitation to pillage. They looked at our pain and saw opportunity. But I am Richard Miller's daughter. He taught me about structural integrity, about fighting rot, about building things that last. They wanted to tear down what we built. Fine, let them learn what happens when you try to demolish something with a solid foundation. The locked door shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. Standing on the porch that Saturday evening, key in hand, I felt the world tilt. The familiar bronze lock set Dad had installed gone, in its place, a shiny silver deadbolt that rejected my key like a broken promise. I knocked. Through the restored glass panels Dad had sourced from a demolition in Tacoma, I could see movement. Stephen appeared, casual as if this was normal. He opened the door 6 inches, the chain still engaged. "Lauren, we weren't expecting you." "It's Saturday. I always come for dinner on Saturday." "Things have changed. Your mother needs stability, routine. Unexpected visits are disruptive." Behind him, I glimpsed Mom in her chair. Dad's chair, actually staring at nothing. Maya walked past carrying a box I recognized, Dad's record collection. "Let me in." "Stephen, this is We've been through this. Your mother and I need privacy to build our life together. You can't just drop by anymore." His voice was steady, practiced. He'd rehearsed this. "If you want to visit your mother, call first. We'll arrange something appropriate." Appropriate. The word came out sharp. "I don't need permission to enter my own." "You're being dramatic." He started closing the door. "Your mother is fine. We're all fine. But these unscheduled intrusions need to stop. I won't have you upsetting everyone with your inability to move forward." The door clicked shut. The deadbolt turned with a sound like bones breaking. I stood there, hand still extended, key useless in my palm. Through the window, I watched Stephen walk back to Mom, his hand on her shoulder, possessive. She didn't look up. Maya continued packing Dad's records, while Colin sprawled on our couch, the one where Dad used to read blueprints while I did homework beside him. They'd colonized our home, invaded it, occupied it, locked me out of my own history. I could have pounded on the door, could have screamed, demanded entry, called the police, but standing there in the gathering dusk, I felt something cold and clear crystallize in my chest. This wasn't impulse or cruelty. This was calculated. Stephen had been planning this since the day he moved in. Maybe since the day he met my grieving mother. I walked to my car slowly, deliberately. Let them watch me leave. Let them think they'd won. In my apartment, I sat in darkness for an hour, not trusting myself to move. The rage was so pure, so white-hot. I knew I had to let it cool into something useful. Dad's voice came back. "Measure twice. Cut once. Anger makes you stupid. Lauren, when you're angry, you rush, and rushed work is bad work." I pulled out my laptop and began researching. Stephen Harper, his previous addresses, his work history, his first wife's obituary, interesting timing on that life insurance payout. His children's court records. Colin had 2 DUIs. Maya had filed for bankruptcy twice. Then I called Tom Parker, Dad's lawyer and oldest friend. "Lauren, it's late. Is everything?" "They changed the locks. Tom, Stephen locked me out of the house." Silence. Then, "The house that's legally yours." "He doesn't know that yet. I mentioned the deed, but I don't think he believes it." "Lauren, this is criminal trespass. We can have him removed tonight." "No," I surprised myself with the calmness. "Not yet. I want to do this right. I want it to be absolutely devastating when it happens." Tom sighed. "Your father always said you got his temper and his patience. Dangerous combination." "How long would an eviction take? A legal one? Bulletproof? No room for appeals?" "With proper notice, 14 days. But Lauren, if your mother..." "Mom made her choice. She stood behind him while he locked me out." The words hurt to say, but they were true. "I'll protect her lifetime residency. But Stephen and his kids, they're done. Come by Monday. Bring your documentation, everything you have. I'll have more by then." That night, I made lists. Every violation, every destroyed piece of Dad's work, every item sold or discarded. I contacted the company that had appraised the house for insurance. They had detailed photos of every original architectural feature, evidence of what had been destroyed. I thought about Dad's workshop wisdom. When you're removing something rotten, Lauren, you can't be gentle. You have to cut deep, past all the damage, or it just spreads. Stephen Harper thought he'd locked me out, but all he'd done was free me from any obligation to be gentle. He'd removed the last reason for restraint. I touched the key in my pocket useless now, but not for long. Soon, I'd be the one changing locks, and when that door closed behind them, it would be forever. They wanted to play games with keys and locks. Fine. Let me show them what it really means to be shut out. Tom Parker's office hadn't changed since I was a child. Same leather chairs, same diploma wall, same photo of him and Dad at a job site in 1992. But the documents spread across his desk were all new deed transfers, trust paperwork, and the will Dad had updated just 6 months before his death. "Your father was thorough," Tom said, adjusting his glasses. "The house is yours, free and clear. Margaret has lifetime residency rights, but no ownership stake. She can't sell, can't transfer, can't even modify the structure without your written permission. Which means every change Stephen made is technically vandalism and destruction of property." Tom pulled out his phone, scrolling through the photos I'd sent. This original woodwork he painted over, the built-ins he demolished, were looking at significant damages. I'd spent the weekend building my case. The restoration company Dad had worked with, Pacific Northwest Heritage Homes, still had his original plans and photographs. Their assessment was damning, over $200,000 in damage to historical architectural features. The painted trim alone would cost $30,000 to properly restore. "Stephen's trying to claim he improved the property value," I said, showing Tom the text messages Stephen had sent before blocking my number. "He wants me to reimburse him for his renovations." Tom actually laughed. "He wants you to pay him for destroying your property. That's bold." But I wasn't done. I'd hired a private investigator just for 2 days, but worth every penny. Stephen Harper had a pattern. His first wife's family had questions about her death. Nothing proven, but she'd changed her will just weeks before the cancer diagnosis. Her adult children from a previous marriage got nothing. "I also found this," I said, pulling out Colin's rap sheet. 2 DUIs, 1 assault charge, pled down to disorderly conduct, and Maya. She's been sued twice by former landlords for property damage. "They're grifters," Tom said simply. "Your mother was a mark." The word stung, but it was true. A grieving widow with a beautiful house and a trusting nature. Stephen had probably started planning this at that first grief support meeting. "I want them out," I said. "All of them. Including your mother." I'd wrestled with this all weekend. Mom can stay if she chooses, but only her, and only after she acknowledges what they've done. Tom nodded, pulling out legal forms. 14-day notice to vacate for Stephen and his children. They're not tenants. They're guests who've overstayed. Your mother's residency is protected, but theirs isn't. While Tom prepared the paperwork, I contacted contractors, not for repairs, not yet, but for documentation. Every modification needed to be cataloged, priced, evaluated. The vinyl flooring Maya installed. It had damaged the original hardwood underneath. Colin's gym equipment bolted into load-bearing walls without permits. The city inspector I spoke with was particularly interested. "Structural modifications without permits. That's serious. I'll need to do a full inspection." "Thursday would be perfect," I said, calculating timeline. Let Stephen think he had time. Let him get comfortable. I also called Dad's old crews, the craftsmen who'd worked with him for decades. Word spread fast in the restoration community. By Monday afternoon, I had 15 offers to help rebuild, most offering discounted rates. "Richard was good people," they all said. "This isn't right." But the masterstroke came from an unexpected source. Mom's sister, Aunt Dorothy, called me Tuesday night. "I've been worried about Margaret," she said. "She hasn't seemed herself. And that man, Lauren, I've been keeping track. Your mother's been withdrawing large sums. Her retirement account is almost empty." The rage that had been cold and calculated flared white-hot again. It wasn't just the house. Stephen was bleeding Mom dry. "How much?" "Close to $80,000 in 6 months. I added financial elder abuse to my documentation. This wasn't just about property anymore. This was about a predator who'd found the perfect victim. Wednesday morning, I sat with Tom as he reviewed everything. The 14-day notice was ready. The damage assessments were complete. The city inspection was scheduled. The financial forensics were damning. "You could probably have him arrested," Tom said. "Elder abuse, destruction of property, fraud if we can prove he misrepresented his intentions." "I want him to know it's coming first," I said. "I want him to spend 2 weeks knowing he's lost everything, the way I felt standing at that locked door." Tom smiled, a sharp expression I'd never seen before. "Your father would be proud. He always said you got the best of him, his patience and his sense of justice." "This isn't about justice anymore, Tom." I signed the eviction notice with Dad's own fountain pen, the one from his desk. "This is about teaching them what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness." The plan was set. The pieces were in position. Stephen Harper thought he'd won by changing the locks. He was about to learn that some doors, once closed, never open again. The family meeting invitation came through Aunt Dorothy, Stephen's attempt to control the narrative. He'd gathered everyone Mom's church friends, Dad's former colleagues, even my cousins from Seattle. The living room I'd been locked out of was now packed with witnesses to my supposed selfishness. I arrived 15 minutes late, deliberately. Let them start without me. Let Stephen think he was in control. When I walked in, the stage scene was perfect. Maya crying prettily on the couch, one hand on her belly. Colin standing protectively behind Mom's chair. Stephen in Dad's spot by the fireplace, playing the concerned patriarch. "Lauren, thank you for coming," Stephen said, voice dripping with false warmth. "We're all here because we love you and want to help you through this difficult time. This intervention is about your inability to let go," he continued, addressing the room more than me. "Your father's death has clearly affected you deeply, and we understand, but your harassment of this family needs to stop." Murmurs around the room. I saw Dad's old foreman, Mike, frowning. Mrs. Patterson from next door looked uncomfortable. They'd known me since I was 10. Maya stood up, tears streaming. "I'm trying to prepare for my baby, and Lauren keeps threatening us. She doesn't want me to have a nursery. She's even trying to throw out a pregnant woman." "She's become obsessed with the past," Colin added. "Can't accept that life moves forward. It's honestly concerning." Then Mom spoke, her voice weak but audible. "Lauren, please, just let us be happy. Your father would want—" "Don't!" The word came out sharper than intended. "Don't you dare invoke Dad while sitting in a room where every trace of him has been destroyed." I pulled out my phone, connecting it to the TV Stephen had mounted over Dad's carefully restored mantel. "Since we're having a family meeting, let's have an honest one." The first photo appeared Dad's built-in bookshelf, the roses he'd carved for Mom visible in the corners. Then the after photo splintered wood in a dumpster. "Stephen did this 3 weeks ago. Those shelves were a 20th anniversary gift to Mom." Next, Dad's workshop, before tools arranged perfectly, projects in progress, after empty, holes in the walls, Colin's gym equipment. 30 years of collected tools, some from my great-grandfather, sold at a yard sale last week. I kept going. The painted trim, the destroyed garden, the vinyl over hardwood, each image paired with the restoration company's assessment, the dollar amount of damage clear. The room had gone silent. Mike stood up, staring at the screen. He painted over Richard's millwork that was hand-carved mahogany. "Your father would be spinning in his grave," Mrs. Patterson whispered. Stephen tried to regain control. "These were improvements. The house was dated." "The house is a registered historical property as of yesterday," I interrupted, pulling out the official paperwork. "I filed the application months ago, with Dad's original restoration documentation. Every change now requires historical committee approval." Then I played my ace, not the deed, not yet, but the recording. Dad's voice filled the room, recorded just a month before his death for the insurance company. "This house represents my life's work. Every beam, every board, was chosen with purpose. I'm leaving it to my daughter Lauren because she understands its value not monetary, but spiritual. It's our family's history, built by hand. maintained with love. Mom started crying real tears, not Maya's performance. But here's the best part, I said, turning to Stephen. Remember when you said I was harassing your family? Let's talk about harassment. I showed the bank statements Aunt Dorothy had helped me obtain. $80,000, withdrawn from my mother's retirement account. Stephen, where did that money go? Margaret gave that freely. To renovate a house she doesn't own. I let that hang. Because that's fraud. Using someone else's money to modify property you have no claim to. The room erupted. Dad's colleagues were standing, voices raised. The church friends surrounded Mom, asking questions. Maya had stopped crying, her face pale. Pastor Williams, who'd known our family for 20 years, stood up. Stephen, is this true? Did you use Margaret's money to change Richard's house? Our house, Stephen snapped, mask finally dropping completely. It's our house, I've invested everything. Into my property, I said quietly. Let me be very clear. Since we have witnesses, I pulled out the deed, the trust documents, everything. This house has been legally mine for 5 years. Mom has lifetime residency, but Stephen, you're a guest, an unwelcome one. I handed him the eviction notice in front of everyone. 14 days. You and your children need to vacate. Mom can stay if she chooses. Colin lunged forward, but Mike and 2 other contractors stepped between us. I wouldn't, son, Mike said quietly. Not unless you want assault added to trespassing. Maya was screaming about her baby, about cruelty, but Mrs. Patterson shut her down. Honey, you've destroyed that poor man's life's work. You're lucky she's not pressing criminal charges. Stephen's face had gone purple. Margaret, tell them, this is our home. But Mom was looking at the photos on the TV. At Dad's workshop turned into Colin's gym. She touched her wedding ring, then looked at Stephen with clear eyes for the first time in months. You sold his tools, she whispered. You said they were in storage. The meeting collapsed into chaos. People were leaving, but not before expressing their disgust to Stephen. Pastor Williams stopped beside me. Your father would be proud. Lauren, sometimes righteous anger is necessary. Within an hour, the house was nearly empty. Only Stephen, his children, Mom, and I remained. This isn't over, Stephen hissed. You're right, I agreed. The city inspector comes tomorrow. The IRS will want to discuss that $80,000, and the elder abuse investigator will be in touch. I turned to Mom. You can stay, but only you, and only after we discuss what you've allowed to happen here. As I left, I heard Stephen shouting, Colin cursing, Maya wailing, but louder than all of that, I heard Dad's voice in my memory. Sometimes, Lauren, you have to tear out the rot completely before you can rebuild. The demolition was complete. Soon, the restoration could begin. The 14 days that followed were a symphony of destruction theirs, not mine. Stephen hired a lawyer, some strip mall attorney who took one look at the documentation and told him to take the deal. There was no deal, just an eviction notice and a promise not to pursue criminal charges if they left peacefully. The city inspector's visit on day 3 was devastating for them. Colin's gym installation had compromised 2 load-bearing walls. The electrical work Stephen had done himself illegally was a fire hazard. The cheap vinyl flooring contained asbestos that was now disturbed and dangerous. This house is condemned until repairs are made, the inspector told me, while Stephen listened from the doorway. No one can legally occupy it. I have contractors ready to start the moment it's vacant, I assured him. Stephen tried everything. He called Adult Protective Services, claiming I was abusing my mother. They interviewed Mom privately and closed the case within hours. He tried to claim tenant rights, but Tom Parker shut that down with a single letter citing state law. He even attempted to get a restraining order, claiming I was harassing them. The judge laughed him out of court. Maya posted sob stories on social media about being thrown out while pregnant. The comments weren't what she expected. Dad's colleagues, neighbors who'd watched him build this house, friends who knew our family's story, they all rallied. Someone even posted the before and after photos of Dad's workshop. Maya deleted her accounts by day 7. Colin was the first to break. I found him loading boxes into a U-Haul on day 10, not even looking at me as I supervised. He'd found the contractor bills I'd left conspicuously on the porch. $300,000 to properly restore everything they'd destroyed. He knew they'd be liable if they fought. Mom had been staying with Aunt Dorothy since the inspection. I met her for coffee on day 12, just the two of us. "I don't know how it happened," she said, looking older than her 58 years. "After your father died, I couldn't think straight. Stephen was just there, making decisions, taking care of things. I didn't realize. He targeted you, Mom. This is what he does." She nodded, tears quiet and genuine. "The house, your father would be heartbroken." "We'll restore it, every detail. I have his plans, his notes. Mike and the crew are ready." "With what money I gave Stephen everything." "I have Dad's life insurance. He left it to me separately, outside the trust. He knew, Mom, somehow, he knew to protect us both." She sobbed then, and I held her. Despite everything, she was still my mother, still the woman Dad loved enough to carve roses for. Day 14 came gray and drizzling, perfect Pacific Northwest weather for an eviction. I arrived with Tom Parker, a locksmith, and 3 off-duty police officers I'd hired for security. Mike and his crew came too, not for work, but for solidarity. Stephen had attempted one last manipulation. My house was trashed, not just messy, but deliberately vandalized. Holes punched in walls, toilets clogged, windows cracked. He'd poured concrete down the kitchen drain. Amateur hour, really. Everything he'd done was documented by the security cameras I'd installed after the inspection. "Add it to the lawsuit," I told Tom, who was photographing everything. Stephen emerged at exactly noon, the legal deadline. He'd aged 10 years in 2 weeks, his silver hair greasy, his clothes wrinkled. Maya waddled behind him, no longer playing the victim, just defeated. Colin was already gone. "You've destroyed your own mother." Stephen spat at me. "Chosen property over family." "No," I said calmly. "I chose my father's legacy over your greed. I chose truth over your lies. And I chose to protect my mother from a predator who stole her savings and tried to steal her home." He stepped closer, and Mike moved between us. "Time to go, buddy." But Stephen had one last card. "Your mother and I are married. We got married last week. This is community property now." I actually smiled. "No, it's not. Washington state law is clear property owned before marriage remains separate property. And even if it weren't, you can't claim community rights to property you don't own. Mom doesn't own this house. Stephen, she never did." Tom handed him another document. "This is a notice of civil suit for elder financial abuse, destruction of property, and fraud. You'll be hearing from the district attorney about criminal charges. I suggest you leave the state." The locksmith was already changing the locks as Stephen loaded the last box. Maya glared at me from their overloaded sedan. "You're a monster," she said, throwing out a pregnant woman. "I'm my father's daughter," I replied. "He taught me to build things properly and to tear out rot completely. You're the rot." As their car pulled away, Mrs. Patterson came over with cookies and a hug. "Your father would be so proud, dear, so proud." The rain stopped as the last new lock clicked into place. I stood in the empty, damaged house, surrounded by Dad's friends, holding Mom's hand as she cried. "Ready to rebuild?" Mike asked. I looked at the destruction Stephen had left behind, at the holes in walls where Dad's careful work had been, at the stained floors and broken fixtures, at everything that would need to be stripped out and restored. "Yeah," I said, squeezing the new keys in my hand. "Let's bring it back. Let's bring it all back." The restoration took 6 months. 6 months of stripping paint from mahogany trim, of carefully matching grain patterns in replacement wood, of Mike teaching me techniques Dad never had the chance to share. Every weekend, the house filled with contractors who'd loved my father, each refusing to take full payment. "Richard would have done the same for us," they'd say. running their hands over restored beams like they were greeting old friends. The built-in bookshelf came first. Mike had salvaged some original pieces from the dumpster, and we rebuilt it exactly as Dad had designed it. I recarved the roses myself, my hands cramping, understanding finally why Dad had spent 3 weeks on those tiny details. Love takes time. Love leaves marks. The workshop resurrection was a community event. Dad's old clients and colleagues brought back tools they'd bought from Stephen's yard sale, refusing reimbursement. "These belong here," they'd say simply. By March, the pegboard was full again, each tool in its designated spot, the ghost of Dad's organizational system restored. Mom moved back in gradually, first just visits, then overnight stays, then finally, in April. She came home. We'd converted the master bedroom into her space. She couldn't sleep where Stephen had been. I understood. Some violations can't be forgotten, only worked around. "I'm seeing a therapist," she told me one evening as we sat on the restored deck, "to understand how I let it happen, how I lost myself so completely." "Grief makes us vulnerable," I said. "Dad knew that. It's why he protected us the way he did." The Mustang came home in May. I'd tracked it down through DMV records. Stephen had sold it to a classic car dealer in Seattle. It cost me $15,000 to buy back what was already ours. But when I parked it in its spot in the garage, Mom cried for an hour. "He's here," she whispered. "I can feel Richard here again." The legal aftermath dragged on. Stephen declared bankruptcy to avoid the civil suit. But the criminal charges stuck. 18 months for elder financial abuse. Colin got probation for the assault charge that finally went through. Maya disappeared entirely, her baby born somewhere far from Portland. I hoped the child would have a better chance without them. Today, a year after that nightmare began, I stand in Dad's workshop, my workshop now finishing a small project. It's a wooden sign for the front door, the Miller House, built 1995, rebuilt with love 2025. Mom's in the garden, coaxing Dad's heirloom tomatoes back to life from seeds Mike had saved. She's different now, older, more cautious, but also somehow more herself. The widow's fog has lifted, replaced by something harder but clearer. "Your father visited me in a dream last night," she says, dirt under her fingernails like he used to have. "He said the house looks perfect." It does. Every board, every nail, every carefully restored detail stands as testament to what we saved. Not just a structure, but a philosophy that good things are worth fighting for. That craftsmanship matters. That love leaves lasting marks in wood and stone and memory. Stephen had tried to erase my father, to bury him under vinyl and white paint and modernization, but Dad had built too well, loved too deeply, planned too carefully. His legacy wasn't just in wood and stone, it was in the lessons he taught me, the strength he instilled, the way he'd somehow known to protect what mattered most. I run my hand along the restored bookshelf, feeling the roses I'd carved, imperfect but present. Dad's voice echoes in the workshop. "Patience and precision, Lauren, build it right, and it lasts forever." The front door opens, original hardwood, lovingly restored, and Mike calls out, "Lauren, the Historical Society's here for the final inspection." I smile, wiping sawdust from my hands the way Dad used to. The house is officially protected now, recognized for its craftsmanship and story. No one can ever destroy it again. But more than that, I understand now what Dad really left me. Not just a house, but the knowledge of how to fight for what matters. How to recognize rot and tear it out completely. How to rebuild after destruction. How to honor love through action, through patience, through the careful restoration of what others would discard. Stephen thought he could lock me out with a simple change of hardware. He never understood that you can't lock someone out of their own foundation. You can't steal what's built into someone's bones, carved into their memory, taught through years of patient instruction. I am my father's daughter. This is my father's house. And both of us, the house and I, are still standing. The lock clicks as I test the new deadbolt one more time. It's a satisfying sound final. Secure, ours. Some doors, once closed, never open again. And some doors, once reclaimed, stand as monuments to the battles we've won. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment, and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts below. What would you have done in my situation? Your comments mean the world to me, and I read every single one.